So for today, I wanted to talk to you about the archetype Lilith, the woman who refused to bow. Long before the names of patriarchs were carved into stone, before kingdoms rose and fell like tides under a pale moon, there was a woman born from the breath of freedom, and her name was Lilith. And no, she was not created from dust beneath anyone's feet. She did not emerge from a rib or rise beneath a crown's command. Lilith was born under an open sky, the stars watching as she took her first breath, in the wilderness beyond borders. There were no walls where she was raised, there were no ceilings to measure her growth, only the forests, the mountains, the beautiful sky, the sunsets, and her unrelenting spirit. From the very beginning, she questioned everything and anything, particularly the roles that were laid before her. See, they told her she should be quiet, but she raised her voice. They told her to be graceful, but she chose power. They warned her to obey, but she learned to walk away. And no, it's not in an unproductive manner or disrespectful manner, but she had questions. She was the motorcycle rider. In an age of cities and cement, Lilith lives not as a myth on an ancient scroll, but as a woman who rides a black motorcycle through the desert roads and the forgotten towns. She is leather and steel. She is poetry and thunder. Her presence is unmistakable. Her long hair whips like a banner behind her helmet. Her boots are scuffed with paths less traveled, and her eyes hold stories of battles that have been won in silence. You see, she lives by no one's clock. In towns where whispers fill diners and men glare from gas stations, Lilith stops, she fills her tank, she drinks her coffee black, and she smiles only when she wants to. When asked by many men why she didn't smile more, she replied simply, "I'm not here for your entertainment, and they don't need to ask twice." Lilith's strength is not born out of spite. She's not difficult to be difficult, but she is fierce out of necessity. There was a time when she trusted, when she loved a man who mistook her for soul for something that was needing to be tamed, trying to clip her wings, and she broke free and she made a promise that no one would make her a helper or servant again. And so she trained. Lilith learned to fight, not because she wanted to hurt others, but because she needed to protect herself and to never be hurt again. She learned how to shoot guns with precision. She studied martial arts from the great women and men who honored discipline over domination. Her fists spoke in fluent defense, her stance a shield against any who sought to cage her. You see, she was nobody's yes woman. And they say self-defense is a right, and for Lilith it became a way of being. It became a declaration of her courage, for she was nobody's prey. In a room of her own, her home is wherever she lays her head. A cabin deep in the pines, a tent by the riverside, sometimes just the stars above, but when she settles, it is in a place of her choosing and her choosing alone. Inside her cabin, books line the walls. Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Raina Maria Rilke, and ancient mystics. Her journals overflow with reflections. She draws sketches of wild flowers, and she writes verses by the moonlight. She plants her own food. She gathers her own rainwater, and she sings to the coyotes that listen from afar. For her, solitude is not loneliness, it is liberty. And in the silence of the woods, she finds herself. She does not fear being alone because she understands that sometimes being alone is better than losing oneself to something that demands her silence. And so many didn't know what to do with Lilith. "You'd be beautiful if you just smiled more," they said. "You're intimidating," they complained. But Lilith was not here to make anyone's life simpler. She existed because she was on her journey, not worrying about "you won't make a good wife." You see, Lilith laughed. She said, "I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be." The men who said she was too much, that they could never handle the fullness of her soul, the women who envied her, often didn't realize she wasn't trying to be different or admired. She just refused to be anything that was dishonest, that was not her honest, authentic self. Marriage was not the end goal for her. It was not the world as she defined it. She did not want a ring that served as a leash. She did not seek a partnership that demanded that she shrink. If love came, it would be love that danced with her in the flame, not what sought to smother it or put it out. And so she lived in the orchard of her own mind. Lilith spent her days walking barefoot through the earth, tending to the orchard she planted herself. Every tree bore fruit only because she sang to it. Every bloom was a conversation between her and the sacred divine. She read about the world, politics, philosophy, science, mathematics, poetry. She studied the stars and wrote down her dreams. Her hands were strong from planting. Her eyes were soft from contemplating beauty. She was as much a creator, an inventor, as she was a rebel. And though she never asked to be a symbol, in her own way she became one. Not out of vengeance, but of permission to live the life she wanted. Permission to say no. Permission to walk away. Permission to be enough without anyone needing to approve her. There was a fire within this woman. There were days that Lilith danced around bonfires, not for show, but because the fire within her called to the flame before her. She chanted old words from forgotten languages and summoned courage from her bones. She was a woman of ceremony, not of tradition. Her rituals were her own, sacred, wild, and unapologetic. Each scar she bore, visible or hidden, was a rune of survival. They told the story of a woman who had faced down storms, both natural and man-made, and she emerged stronger each time. She did not romanticize pain, but she understood that adversity allowed her to honor her endurance. People called her dangerous. People called her a rebel, spreading terrible ideas, but she never harmed anyone. And because she showed others what life could look like if you stopped being afraid, some declared her mad. But she will not be owned. Men who tried to capture her spirit learned quickly. Lilith was not to be owned, not by charm, not by gold, not by threats. I am not your Eve, she would say, and I never was. She wasn't a rebel without a cause. Her cause was freedom, and she knew that freedom meant being misunderstood. But she would live for freedom and die for freedom. And Lilith did not seek war. Neither did she run from it. When the system tried to bind her with labels, with shame, with expectations, she burned their blueprints and she built the life that she wanted on her own, starting from scratch. She was fierce, not because she had anything against the men of the world. She loved herself too deeply to be anything less than whole. She was the woman who became a myth. When she was young, Lilith cried because the teacher told her to sit like a lady. And so she remembered how it was always these demands being placed on her. And she cried when a friend betrayed her, saying she was too much, she was too wild, that she needed to conform. She cried when her body was policed, her voice was silenced, her ambition mocked. But it taught her toughness, and she didn't stay crying. She trained, she healed, she learned to tackle the shadow parts of herself. She outgrew the pain like a snake shedding skin, and every piece of her that had once been shamed became a beautiful part of her armor. In time, the girl who once cried became a woman whose name echoed in whispers, Lilith, a name said with reverence, or fear, or even awe. One evening, Lilith sat by a riverbank, the setting sun bathing her skin in gold. She wrote in her journal as she drew her quill pen, "They tell me I don't smile enough, but I smile for the moon. not for the masses. I smile for the sun, but not for those who look down on me. I may not make a good wife, but I'll be a damn good legend. A fox watched her from the brush. A wind carried her scent to the cedar trees. And in that sacred stillness, the world made all the more sense. She wasn't here to bear witness. She didn't need applause. Her joy was not performance. Her life was her art. She was the woman who refused to stay silent. And her story is not just hers. It is for anyone who is told to shrink themselves, to silence their laughter, to smooth out their rage, to smile, to placate, to make people feel comfortable. It is for those who are called unladylike, for climbing trees or speaking too boldly. It is for those who say no, who walk away and choose a life alone, not because they're broken, not because they're difficult, but because they're complete within themselves. It is for the ones who carry fire in their bones and the wind in their hair, who never needed permission to be powerful. It is for each of you who read this, wondering if your rebellious spirit is worth it. And Lilith's answer, hell yes. There is legacy in the ashes. Lilith never left a dynasty in the traditional sense. No palace bore her name. No man claimed her lineage. There weren't statues of her erected at every street corner. But her story moved like a song through generations. Through the woman that left an abusive home in the night. Through the girl that said no to the boy who pushed too hard. Through the artist who painted her rage. Through the mother who told her daughter she didn't need a man to be complete. Because there's so much more to life than just that. It is not that one sits around just waiting to please another. You see, Lilith's name became code, not just for rebellion, but for resilience, for rising again and again, for walking alone without fear. And so the last word is this. When the end of her journey came, it was not with a whisper, but it was a sigh of fulfillment, of utter joy. You see, Lilith passed on, but she was eternal. Her motorcycle parked at the edge of a cliff where she watched 100 sunsets. Her journal lay open beside her, the last line written in a sure and steady hand. I lived, not for them, but for me, and that had always been enough. And so her essence floated up into the stars, where she became her own constellation. And in the silence after, the wind carried her name as a promise. She was a woman to be remembered for so many talents. She was a polyglot. She was curious. She had spoken so many languages, not just the ones spoken by nations, but even the body language, the quiet dialects of body, of tone, of culture, of heart. She taught herself to listen first, not to just speak. She learned Arabic in the sand-swept streets of Marrakesh. She whispered Spanish poems in the candlelit corners of Medellin, and she debated philosophy in French cafes under skies of gray and gold. Her travels were not for luxury. They were for truth, where she was a constant seeker of knowledge. Lilith did not seek the safety of the familiar and the comfortable. She craved the wisdom of the unknown. She was brave, and she went where others did not dare tread, for she saw differences not as danger but opportunity, and when others judged, she inquired. Her journal filled with phrases and proverbs, customs and recipes, songs and myths, each one a jewel in her growing crown of understanding. She traveled because ignorance offended her, and she wanted to know all that there was to know in the world. Every city she visited chipped away at the walls of her narrow thought as she became enlightened and broadly understood many things. She sought the opportunity to unlearn and relearn and widen her soul, where standing out was not a gift and not a curse, it was her duty. And in tradition, she bowed in temples, danced at solstice fires, met with strangers, and walked with awe through museums of our history. Lilith was never trapped by one place, by one identity, by one story. What she constantly was in the effort of reinventing herself. To know the world was to know herself. And so she walked the earth with reverence, a student of anything and everything sacred and strange. And if I don't see you, just remember, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.